wonderful job. For fellows like George, Abe, and me too, it's great to shake hands with a mob and to hold every kid on your knee too. Every word that I speak goes into headlines. When I speak, all the papers hold their deadlines. When I've found a way of dropping a hint or a glint of the truth that the boys cannot print. For instance, when I was courting Eleanor, I told her Uncle Teddy I wouldn't run for president unless the job was steady. Don't print it, strictly off the record. We entertained the royalty, but we were never flustered. We gave them Yankee hot dogs with Coleman's English mustard. Don't print it, strictly off the record. It's pleasant at the White House, but I'll tell you how I feel. The food is simply terrible, just sauerkraut and veal. If Mrs. R would stay at home, I'd get a decent meal. But that's off the record. To Hyde Park. It's not for just the ride there. It's not that I like Hyde Park, but I love to park and hide there. Don't print it, it's strictly off the record. I sit up in my study writing gags for Mr. Ickes and insults for the gentleman who'd love to slip a Mickey's. Don't print that. Off the record. I scrapped the Prohibition Act when we required a bracer and finished up the Boulder Dam to give the boys a chaser. Don't print it, it's strictly off the record. And for my friends in Washington who complain about the taxes, who cares as long as we can knock the axe out of the axes? Don't print it, it's strictly off the record. I can't forget how Lafayette helped give us our first chance to win our fight for liberty, and now they've taken France. We'll take it back from Hitler and put ants in his Japan, and that's for the record. Good work, kids. I'll see you at 11 in the morning.
One of the great tunes from one of the great American films. That's James Cagney, and as George M. Cohan in Yankee Doodle Dandy. And that part of our very wide-ranging discussion tonight about American films, about summer movies, and we're going to be taking some pot shots and some celebratory remarks with the AFI Top 100 list of the best American movies, and engaging in this conversation tonight on Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio KCBX. It's my good friend ready for summer, wearing his Bermuda shorts tonight to the station along with his Florsheim shoes. It's my good friend Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, a man who always knows to wear white after Memorial Day, the undisputed czar of film on the Central Coast, a man who will never need a presidential pardon. I'm talking about, of course, your friend and mine, the incomparable Jim Dee.
We're topical tonight.
Yeah, we're on message.
Well, folks, tonight's program, as we approach the 4th of July and it's summertime, we were just talking about some films to watch around Independence Day. But actually, the subject of this show erupted out of Bob and, we looked at the AFI list of the top 100 movies. And the more we looked at it, the more infuriated we got. We kept on looking at why is this here, why is that there. The whole thing is set up, and then there's certain films on there that we had no clue why they were on there. Not so much because of the quality. I think Bob and I agree that the AFI Top 100 Movies list is a great guide to some great American films, but
well, you know, Jim, the AFI list always leaves us with a lot of. Well, for one thing, my blood pressure rises.
Yes.
For another thing,
mine too.
Is always the question, why is this film even on the list? And there's a few here that you and I both were kind of just appalled that they're even on the list, let alone how high up the list. We're not going to talk numbers tonight.
Well, I think what we need to do is, if you'd like to take a look at the list of the AFI Top 100 movies, you can log on and Google AFI Top 100 list or 2007. But the first thing you want to do if you print out this list is get your little whiteout marker and get rid of all the numbers. In fact, one of my typical things when we talk about the Oscars, you know, they pick all these great films as Oscar nominees, but singling out the best seems to be counterproductive, at least in our opinion. It's like
Absolutely.
It's like there's 9 Beethoven symphonies. Let's vote to see which one the best one is. What purpose does that serve? And as we're looking at these films with numbers next to them, it does something. It creates a rating system, essentially, and we don't want to rate something like Citizen Kane next to Raging Bull or One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. What we'd like to do is this wonderful list of American movies, most of them are American, it should be, you know, set up side by side, essentially. They're all equal in some respect in the fact they're high quality. We're still talking about them years after they were made. Perhaps one of the more perplexing things is only one film is on this top 100 list from the year but 2001 and nothing after that. So it could be said that the top 100 movies are maybe there'll be some discoveries from 2001 to the present, but obviously they're not making movies that are making the list over the past 7 years or so.
Well, you know, Jimmy, I've often wondered if we were to look at, say, the 2027 AFI Top 100, what that might look like. And I gotta be honest, I'd be terrified.
Be worried.
Because I'm sure it would be dominated by a lot of stuff we would have slagged off as crap and have done so. See, that's the thing. One person's crap is someone else's classic. I guess as infuriating as it can be sometimes, but that's also the beauty of movies, too. You know, someone can see something. Well, I mean, I see things in junk. I could tell you right now, the Terror from Beyond Space is not on this list, and I'm outraged.
Well, there's the other idea of, I'm not sure I was going to go with this, but rating these movies and putting them on some sort of list of best to worst. I mean, when I want to say that Yankee Doodle Dandy, which we just opened our program with, is number 98 on the top 100. Now, why? I mean, it's almost as if we already know that these 100 films are excellent films. You can't go wrong with 99% of them. Next year, how about a list of 100 more movies? Just leave these where they are. These are 100 of the best films, and then next year, let's fill the slots with other great movies. And I guess what I was really going to say, Bob, when you're talking about one man's treasure is another man's trash, it's the Duke Ellington words on enjoying music. If it sounds good, it is good. If you like a movie, it's a good movie. And there's the whole criteria right there. It's the basis of art and the fact that if you like it, well, it's a good film. So there's probably many films that you like that aren't on this list, although it is acknowledged that there are some fabulous things on this list. And, you know, to really look at some of the good stuff on here, Bobby, I mean, I'm so glad that Charlie Chaplin is recognized with City Lights and Modern Times. The enigma is the fact that City Lights is almost in the top 10. Modern Times is way down the list. And, you know, how do the two get separated by, 70 notches on this goofy list?
That's I think a question we could spend a whole hour just talking about that alone. And I think, Jim, if there's anything good about this list, and like you, I'm not a big fan of lists where one is the best and then there's one down at 100, which is, the worst? I don't think so. But at least it stirs conversation.
Yes.
And I think what it does in a positive way, it gets people to get back in touch with classic cinema. Gets maybe some people that are breaking into movies with Lord of the Rings, younger viewers, and they're looking at their favorite film, how it rates with all the greats of all time, and hopefully it makes them go, you know what, I want to see Citizen Kane. I'd like to check out Casablanca. I'm hoping that that's what it does, because that would be worthwhile. Just to think about, only one of the Lord of the Rings films made it and not all three. Oh, that's horrible. It's like, come on. Come on.
Well, I was also thinking of the criteria that gets these films on the list, and the fact that, for instance, again, hit me up the side of the head because I'm saying a number, but on this top 100 list, number 20 is It's a Wonderful Life. Now, maybe you remember, when it was released in 1946, It's a Wonderful Life was a box office flop. And now It's a Wonderful Life is this perennial favorite. You see it every Christmas on television. It's there. It's one of those ones that are part of your holiday season. About 25 years ago, this movie did not have that reputation. I mean, it was still considered a great film, but it didn't have the popularity and that playing at Christmas every year. I want to say 25 years ago, it wasn't happening. And so how does it happen over the course of years? It could be that people discover films, or it's interesting how the greatness of a film may take a while to make it onto a list like this.
You know what's interesting about this? And of course, I'm talking about It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy. And you made a note there that 25 years ago, suddenly we're seeing it all over the place. It's just one of those odd things. It went into public domain at that time. The rights expired on it. So suddenly you could see It's a Wonderful Life on every channel because they didn't have to pay anybody they didn't have to pay any royalties or rights to a studio or an individual on the film. Ergo, it's everywhere. And I think for the first time, probably ever, since its initial release, which, as you say, it did horribly. Well, not horribly. It just didn't do very well at all.
Box office flop.
Yeah. But this was a time when it actually caught an audience. And let's face it, holiday time, I don't know about you, but some Christmases at my house, it's like being at a lockdown at a maximum security prison. You're grateful for anything that isn't, too sickeningly sweet where you're going to go into diabetic shock. So the chances of seeing It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart and, all these, Donna Reed and Thomas Mitchell and Ward Bond, et cetera, Sheldon Leonard, it's a relief to see something like that. Just like it was seeing John Wayne in Three Godfathers. Like, oh, good. Not a bunch of guys in beards and sandals walking around with a bunch of sheep. It's like, I don't want to see this stuff. But I think a lot of people got to see it then. And I think this is what's interesting, Jim. This is why I wonder what this list will look like 20 years from now. Here's a film that came out in the 40s, didn't do well, even though it had a big star, Jimmy Stewart, one of the greatest American filmmakers ever, Frank Capra, and a great idea, kind of an updating of Dickens's Christmas Carol, but done in a uniquely American way. And it's discovered a generation later, basically, when the film goes into public domain, and suddenly anybody with a print can broadcast it or put it on video. So we're all seeing it now in a way it had never been seen before, en masse. So I'm wondering what'll happen on the 2027 AFI Top 100 list. What film is going to sneak out there that we've ignored that's going to be the big hit for movie watchers in the future? It's an intriguing thought.
I want every movie made from here on to make it on future top 100 lists. How about that? That's what you movie directors have to live up to. Let's start making movies that make top 10 lists. Now, before we leave It's a Wonderful Life, I just want to say, Bob, that here's a film that went into public domain. In other words, there wasn't enough popularity, and maybe, I'm not sure, Frank Capra just lost the rights to it or whatever, but obviously it didn't garner enough popularity or perhaps look at as being a money maker, potential for making money in the future. It goes into public domain. Now it shows up at number 20 on the AFI list, and thankfully,
Yeah, actually, this is Jim and I talked about this before we went on the air. One, we was like, if we don't do the AFI list today, we're just not going to be able to do it. It'll be too late. But number two, it's so easy to slag the list. Believe me, we could spend the whole hour just beating up on it. But here's a case where this is kind of an unusual and a positive thing, a quirky thing that I think works well in terms of American movies.
Yeah, and what we're doing tonight is examining the current AFI list of the top 100 American movies. And before we play some great clips from some of the great selections, we do want to make just make note of some of the crazy rules that seem to be broken. Now, with all due respect to David Lean, two of his films, which are two of the best films ever made easily. We're talking about Bridge on the River Kwai and, of course, Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia making it in the top 10 of this list. Excuse me for mentioning the number. And a little further on down the list, we have Bridge on the River Kwai. David Lean, British director. Most of the cast in both of these movies are not American actors, and they're not American films. I'm not sure how they ended up here. And of course, my question being, if David Lean, who is not from America, makes it on here, and of course those films are great films, but where is Akira Kurosawa? Where is Federico Fellini? Where is Ingmar Bergman? I guess, American doesn't quite describe this list, but obviously this list does not take into account any foreign language films at all. Nope.
Yeah,
so
they don't exist.
Maybe the top 100 English language films would better describe this film, but again, erase the numbers and forget about the rating. And I'm just going to run down the top 10, and then we're also going to cherry pick and give you some great films to watch over the holiday time we have in July. But the top 10 of the list include the obvious: Citizen Kane, The Godfather, Casablanca, Raging Bull, Singin' in the Rain, Gone with the Wind, Lawrence of Arabia, Schindler's List at number 8, Vertigo, and The Wizard of Oz. We could go on, but again, the numbering doesn't really mean a whole lot. Check out the list, forget the numbers, and you've got a great guide to some great American films.
Well, there's two things about this list that are interesting, Jimmy. As you mentioned, It's a Wonderful Life, and on number 12 on the list, The Searchers, John Ford's and John Wayne's Western classic, which seems to be gaining critical momentum the older it gets. These are two films that did not do well at the box office. In fact, probably for both these great filmmakers, they were, at the time of their release, a bit of a disappointment. But a new generation of filmmakers and film lovers discovered these films, and I think in the case of The Searchers, it was a little ahead of its time. People were not prepared for John Wayne to be kind of an anti-hero, which was going to be big about 15, 20 years later. They were ahead of the curve, so to speak. What I also find intriguing, and I'll get to a pick right here, is that not all of these movies are huge budgeted films. In fact, some of them are kind of really glorified B movies when you really look at it closely. And of course, I'm talking about, first one I want to talk about is High Noon, that came out in 1950. I mean, this film was released independently. It's not affiliated with any studio. I think Republic Pictures has the rights to it now. But at the time of its release, Stanley Kramer produced his production company. I don't believe that was released by any major studio. And of course, The backstory on this film is that it was written by Carl Foreman, who was on the verge of being blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee. It was directed by Fred Zinnemann, who would go on to such Academy Award-winning classics as From Here to Eternity and A Man for All Seasons, which I don't believe are on this list, and they won a ton of Academy Awards, both films. So this is kind of an interesting film. Now, dig it, it's a low-budget film, but it's got a big star, Gary Cooper, who, as we know, was a conservative politically, though not a ravenous fire and brimstone, smoke and fire conservative. He was just a low-key kind of conservative, which, believe it or not, they actually existed at one time. And, you know, his star had kind of waned a bit. And I believe at that time he was, you know, he was a big star with Warner's in the 40s and Paramount in the 30s. He's getting on in years now. And, you know, at this point, he becomes affiliated with this project because he likes the script. And what is the script about? It's about a man standing up to do the right thing when everyone else is running and hiding. And what an interesting thought this is. In other words, this film really kind of discusses the political climate in America and in Hollywood in particular. And they're telling the story through a Western. And they actually land one of the greatest Western stars of them all. And that's the only reason this movie got made, is because Gary Cooper signed on to it. And it also features Lon Chaney Jr., who's going to be in the clip, Grace Kelly when she first starts out, Katie Gerardo, the great Mexican actress. Let's not forget Lee Van Cleef and a few others. This is a great, without Cooper, it would have been like, say it had John Payne or someone else of less stature, Lloyd Bridges. Oh, well, Lloyd Bridges is in this film too. What am I saying? This movie would have been an interesting film, but it may not even have gotten made. Gary Cooper swam against the tide, the political tide, put his name and reputation on the line, and this movie was made. It won a bunch of Academy Awards, which may or may not mean something, but the bottom line is this film from 57 years ago still stands up, and it's on the list. I don't care if it's 1 or 100. I'm just glad it's there, because this is, without a doubt, an American classic for the ages.
One of the great American movies. Here's a clip from High Noon. It's Gary Cooper approaching Lon Chaney Jr., and Gary Cooper is in big trouble. He's got 3 people gunning for him. He's asking for advice from his old buddy, played by Lon Chaney Jr. This is from High Noon.
You've been my friend all my life. You got me this job. You made him send for me. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be like you, Mark. You've been a lawman all your life.
Yeah, all my life. It's a great life. You risk your skin catching killers, and the juries turn them loose so they can come back and shoot at you again. If you're honest, you're poor your whole life. And in the end, you wind up dying all alone on some dirty street. For what? For nothing. For a tin star.
Listen, the judge has left town, Harvey's quit, and I'm having trouble getting deputies.
It figures. It's all happened too sudden. People gotta talk themselves into law and order before they do anything about it. Maybe because down deep they don't care. They just don't care.
What'll I do, Mark?
I was hoping you wouldn't come back.
You know why I came back.
Not to commit suicide.
Sometimes prison changes a man.
Not him. This is all planned. That's why they're all here. Get out, Will. Get out.
It's a scene from High Noon, one of the great American movies. And I think, Bob, what makes this movie enduring is that truthful script and the fact that, the hero can be a hero. You can do all you want. You can be a stand-up person. But, when it comes down to it, some people don't care. Or what you get for your honesty is perhaps your own sense of integrity or dignity. But beyond that, as it says in this film, Gary Cooper's standing alone. As you said, everyone else is hiding behind him. And it's a great, great film.
Jimmy, it reminds me of a line from a film that should be on this list and isn't. And that's Judgment at Nuremberg. And I think about the line Spencer Tracy lays on, I think it's Burt Lancaster or whoever it was, when he's handing down the sentences. He goes, it's about what a country stands for when standing for something matters. Mm-hmm. And this film resonates with that type of moral tone. A man who takes a stand to do the right thing, more often than not, stands alone. And he finds that he's not just facing pressure from what's coming at him, he's facing even more pressure from people who should be on his side, who are behind him, not supporting him. This is a classic. This could almost be a Greek classic, or Shakespeare could have touched this. This is a human classic. And that's what I love about this. This is a uniquely American take on it, and it'll stand the test of time as long as anybody, anywhere is telling any kind of story.
Now, we do want to move on, but I do want to make note that the AFI Top 100 Movies does have a handful of really good Westerns, including High Noon. We have The Searchers on there. The Wild Bunch is included in this group of films. I'm sure there's a...
Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, deservedly so.
Yeah, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is on this list. So Westerns are pretty well represented, but as we mentioned in the opening of the program, this is a wide-ranging discussion because there's so many different films on here. In fact, we're going to move into our next film before we take our break. And here's a great film to watch any time of the year, but I think summertime is the time to watch it. And hey, around the 4th of July, you can have your celebrations and watch American Graffiti, which is on the AFI list.
And for my money, Jimmy, always one of the great summer/American movies. I mean, here it is, low budget, George Lucas, a rookie, out of the gate. Couldn't get this movie made if he didn't have Francis Coppola to help him out. And it's great seeing a lot of young people at that time starting out. You've got Richard Dreyfuss, Ron Howard finally shaking off the scourge of Opie. And he's a revelation in this film.
Oh, he's very good.
And, of course, you've got Paul Lamont, a man that I've always lamented wouldn't have been a bigger star, because I was a big fan of his when this movie came out, and why he wasn't a bigger star than he was will always be one of those great what-ifs. And let's not forget a very young Harrison Ford.
Yes.
This is a classic film.
Here's one to watch around 4th of July, a great American film, a clip from American Graffiti.
Listen, your sister calls. I'll talk to you.
Oh, wait a
okay?
second, wait a second. She can wait.
We'll make it short and sweet, though, huh?
Listen, I don't think I'm gonna be going tomorrow.
Come on, what are you talking about?
Well, I was thinking I could wait a year, go to city for a while.
You chicken thing.
Oh, wait a minute.
After all we went through to get accepted, we're finally getting out of this turkey town, and now you want to crawl back into your cell, right? You want to end up like John? You just can't stay 17 forever. You've got to get that through your head.
I just need some time.
I gotta go talk to Lori. Now take it. Take it. Now, we're leaving in the morning, all right? We're leaving in the morning.
It's Ron Howard, Richard Dreyfuss, and I think Charles Martin Smith is in that scene about the idea of getting out of the podunk town after high school. And I love the line, you can't stay 17 forever. We all want to, but this film captures it. And, the feel of this film, George Lucas, I want to say it's one of his best films, if not his best film. But what a great perennial favorite, a great American film. It's Take Two, the movie program on Public Radio, KCBX, San Luis Obispo, KSBX, Santa Barbara. We're streaming at kcbx.org. Bob and I are discussing American films for this time of the year, July 4th, Independence Day, and we're also sort of dovetailing off of the AFI list of top 100 American movies. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
I wanna go to the movie show, me and my baby. Come on, let's go. On to the movie show. Let's go. I buy the popcorn as soon as we hit the door. My two brothers, Bell and Pons, sitting in the front row. They bought the candy. We don't need nothing more. I love a movie show, I tell you, in black and white. I don't care what it is. I don't care how small the theater is. I don't care who's playing. I don't care how long they got popcorn and candy bars. Butterfly McQueen, she's gone with the wind. I love the film of Anthony Quinn. The creature from the Black Lagoon, Red River.
Support for KCBX comes from American Flatbread, all-natural pizzas. The bakers at American Flatbread invite you to their restaurant in Los Alamos. Open every Friday and Saturday evening from dinner from 5 to 10. More information at foodremembers.com.
Let's go. Morgan Freeman and Edward G. Man. James L. Jones.
We're back on Take Two, the movie program. My name is Jim Dee. I'm here with Bob Whiteford. We're talking about American movies. We're talking about the AFI Top 100 American Movies. We're blasting the list a little bit as well. And also just noting a few cherry-picked films from this great list of movies, if you erase the numbers, of films you can enjoy around the holidays of July 4th, and just celebrating great American films. And Bob, you want to talk a little more about American Graffiti?
Just a little bit more, Jimmy. What's interesting about this film is that it's also the first film I can think of where the soundtrack is all rock and roll songs, which is something that has become very much the norm now. And at that time, I think like 1973, that was highly unusual. It's funny because as the movie ends with Richard Dreyfuss flying off to college and the Beach Boys All Summer Long is playing during the final credits, it's a happy song, but yet the whole tone of the ending is kind of sad and almost melancholy. Summer's over, and in a way, their dreamlike world is coming to an end. Their adolescence is coming to an end. The world, we know their world is going to change, and that's what makes this one of the great American movies. That's what makes it one of the great summer movies. In fact, I'll be a little chauvinistic here, Jimmy, and say that the summer movies are American movies. We dominate that. We seem to have a love affair with summer cinematically that I would say would challenge the Europeans and other people. Great film.
Well, the next few films we want to discuss from this great American movie list, though, are a little bit more edgy. But the reason I think we're bringing them up is, I guess, we have to go back to the 60s and 70s to find those great American films with great writing that were really kind of pushing the envelope. And I guess you and I, Bob, we look for that stuff. In fact, repeating what we mentioned before, there's one film on this top 100 list from 2001, and they gave it to the first Lord of the Rings. There's nothing there's nothing after 2001 on this list, which is I don't know. When I noticed that, of course, at the end of the program, we're going to talk about some things that aren't on this list, which are shocking to say the least. But again, we're going to talk about a few films that are on this list. And the first one we're going to talk about is The Graduate, which has a high placement on the list, but still one of the great American movies, but one of the edgiest. I still think you can watch The Graduate now, and it might make you squirm a little bit while you're laughing. I mean, we have a great clip with Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman. In fact, Dustin Hoffman doing a great job on this list. He's in The Graduate. We're going to talk about Midnight Cowboys. All the President's Men is also on this list. So I think Dustin made some good choices as far as starring in some films that will be for the ages. But we talk about American films, fun films like American Graffiti. We mentioned Singin' in the Rain is also on this list. But I like to celebrate the films that are American films that really did something. They pushed the envelope. They had either great writing or they were willing to take some real risks. And boy, I look for that. Our next 3 movies we're going to talk about, our next 4 movies do that. We're going to start with The Graduate.
Well, Jimmy, here it is. I think this came out in like 1967. Now we go back one year, 1966, and of course I'm referencing the director Mike Nichols. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf?
Which is also on the list. Thank you.
Yeah, very much so. I agree. Thank you. I'm amazed they even remembered that film was ever made, but they can't ignore Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf no more than they could ignore The Graduate. These movies changed American movies. And I think with The Graduate, what makes it even more so deserving as an American classic is how it captured the feelings, the restlessness of younger people at that time, how they were looking at the world around them and not particularly liking what they saw. And this film nails it. Like so many this film was imitated so much after the fact. I mean, I guess that's one of the great homages to a film that really breaks ground is how many times it's been imitated but never equaled. And The Graduate is a film of the ages. And like you said, Jimmy, I think the message of this film, the feeling of this film, will resonate as long as there are young people entering the world and having their ideas of what the world should be like, and then looking around seeing how it really is. And that moment of realization that things are not what they thought they would be or not what they were told it would be.
Well, here's a great American film and a scene from The Graduate, and we're going to let this play a little bit because I'm not going to give anything away, really. This is the scene where Anne Bancroft is slowly seducing Dustin Hoffman, where he actually asks if she's seducing him, and you always get that little snippet. It's a great couple of lines, but what I really want our listeners to hear is everything that came before it, everything that came after it. In other words, the conversation and the sustained kind of squirminess along with the comedy, which is just great in this film. Here is Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman from The Graduate.
What do you drink? Bourbon?
Look, Mrs. Robinson, I drove you home. I was glad to do it, but I have some things on my mind. Can you understand that?
Yes.
All right.
What do you drink? Benjamin, I'm sorry to be this way, but I don't want to be left alone in this house.
Why not?
Please wait till my husband gets home.
When is he coming back?
I don't know. Drink?
No. Are you always this much afraid of being alone?
Yes.
Well, why can't you just lock the doors and go to bed?
I'm very neurotic. May I ask you a question? What do you think of me?
What do you mean?
You've known me nearly all your life. You must have formed some opinion of me.
Well, I always thought that you were a very nice person.
Did you know I was an alcoholic?
What?
Did you know that?
Look, I think I should be going.
Sit down, Benjamin.
Mrs. Robinson, if you don't mind my saying so, this conversation is getting a little strange. Now, I'm sure that Mr. Robinson will be here any minute now.
No.
What?
My husband will be back quite late. He should be gone for several hours.
Oh, my God.
Pardon?
Oh, no, Mrs. Robinson, oh, no.
What's wrong?
Mrs. Robinson, you didn't expect...
What?
I mean, you didn't really think I'd do something like that.
Like what?
What do you think?
Well, I don't know.
For God's sake, Mrs. Robinson. Here we are. You got me into your house. You give me a drink. You put on music. Now you start opening up your personal life to me and tell me your husband won't be home for hours.
So?
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. Aren't you?
Well, no, I hadn't thought of it. I feel very flattered.
Mrs. Robinson, will you forgive me for what I just said?
It's all right.
It's not all right. It's the worst thing I ever said to anyone.
Sit down.
Please forgive me because I like you. I don't think of you that way, but I'm mixed up.
It's all right. Finish your drink.
Mrs. Robinson, it makes me sick that I said that to you.
Well, forget it right now. Finish your drink.
What is wrong with me?
Have you ever seen Elaine's portrait?
Her portrait?
Yes.
No.
We had it done last Christmas. Would you like to see it?
Very much.
Well, as that clip was playing from The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft, we were cracking up in here with the squirmy reaction to that incredible script, and just the timing is perfect, and this whole film is filled with great script, and again, an edginess, of course. Dustin Hoffman more interested in Mrs. Robinson's daughter, although he ends up hanging out with Mrs. Robinson.
Well, all I want to know, Jimmy, is where can I get that nutty soundtrack?
That's Take Two type music, isn't it?
I know, that's great.
Let's move on, though. I mean, here we go into another great American film included on the AFI list. Not only a great film in and of itself, but showing a quantum leap of Dustin Hoffman's acting, because we're talking about Midnight Cowboy. We do have to talk about this film being on this list. It was a great American film, but John Schlesinger, who directed it, is not an American. And we've known in some cases where non-American directors can make the best American movies. If we talk about even Billy Wilder not really being from this country, he's a great example. But Midnight Cowboy, another rather edgy film, but at the time I considered a great American film, and the fact it was really pushing the envelope. We were sort of catching up with the Europeans at the time, and it holds up to this day. It's shocking in some parts, and showing John Voight in one of his greatest roles as Joe Buck, and watching Dustin Hoffman going from his role in The Graduate to his role in Midnight Cowboy. What a great American actor.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I mean, I don't think a lot of folks out there realize just what a treasure Dustin Hoffman is as one of the great American or just great film actors that ever lived. I mean, you can go from Benjamin to Ratso Rizzo. That's kind of like De Niro going from Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull to Rupert Pupkin in King of Comedy. I mean, it's that amazing, that much versatility, that much range. That puts him in De Niro country in my book. And this film, which came out in 1969, still stands up tall in terms of its message, its grittiness, its ugly truths. It's a fantastic film, beautifully done.
And it also fits into that idea you were mentioning. I mean, it's funny comparing American Graffiti with Midnight Cowboy, but it's the idea of having this view of the world. We see Joe Buck going to New York, who wants to be a hustler. He gets there. The romanticism of it all fades very quickly in the fact that when you're in the harsh reality of New York City, being a cowboy hustler may not be what you thought it was going to be.
Exactly. Your clientele may not be what you thought it would be either.
Here's a scene from Midnight Cowboy from the great director John Schlesinger. It's John Voight, and, well, he's just had some fun, and he's realizing that his hustler days may be a little more difficult than he thought. This is from Midnight Cowboy.
Say, Cass, I sure have enjoyed being here. I believe it's as fine a time as I've ever had in my damn life.
Me too, lover.
Oh, that's good, it is, because, well, hell, the way you make me feel so damn at home here, I almost hate to bring up business.
Yeah, it's murder, isn't it? What line are you in, sweetie? Sit me up, will you, Tex? Maury's always complaining about his ulcers.
Yeah, well, I don't know what line Moore's in, but myself now, I'm a kind of hustler.
Oh, person got to make a living.
Pardon me, ma'am?
I said a person's got to make a living.
Are you sure you heard what I said?
Sorry, Tex, my mind isn't all here. I don't want to be late for my date with Maury. Listen, sweetie, why don't you run along and take the number, and we're going to get in touch with each other real soon, aren't we? Would you believe that? I forgot to get to the bank, and now it's too late. Listen, I have to take a taxi. I need a few bucks. I hate to ask you, but you're such a doll.
You know, Cass, that's a funny thing, you mentioning money. Because I was just about to ask you for some.
Oh.
The hustler getting hustled.
Yeah, it's from Midnight Cowboy. It appears on the AFI Top 100 American Movies list. I think it should be firmly one of the great American movies. And again, another foreign director taking a very keen look at the American way. They can do it almost better than the American directors, and I'm glad it's on the list. We move on now to the fact that gangster movies have always been a great part of American cinema. It's represented on the list with some great film noirs. The Maltese Falcon is included on the list. I'm trying to think what else we mentioned.
But the Godfather's films are on it.
Well, the Godfather, yeah, the two Godfather, 1 and 2, and the Godfather making the number 2 slot. Hit me, Bob. I said number 2,
That's okay.
But still, down on the list, but glad it's there. It's in the 90s in this AFI list. Is what's become a classic American film. It's Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas from 1990.
Well, you know what's great about this film, Jimmy, is that you don't have to be a fan of the genre to really be swept away by this film or swept into its mechanisms. This is a film, like you said before we went on the air, that just it grabs you from the opening frame and it doesn't let you go until the last frame. And this is a film that you can go back and visit time and time and time again, and you're going to see something different. This is, I think, Scorsese at his absolute best. And that says a lot, because I would still put this film over Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, both of which I love immensely. This, I think, is his crowning achievement as a filmmaker. It's got a great performance from Robert De Niro. Ray Liotta is a revelation. This is a film that really elevated him to near mythical status in some quarters. You're introduced to Lorraine Bracco, who, as we know, is scored big in The Sopranos. And, of course, Joe Pesci in easily his greatest performance, for which he won an Academy Award, and deservedly so. He is amazing in this film. He's just this psychotic engine that runs this film. And not to mention, you have Michael Imperioli, you have Frank Vincent. I mean, it's loaded. Vito Antuofermo, Jerry Vale, Henny Youngman. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this movie. It's fantastic.
What we've chosen to play for you from Goodfellas is the trailer, the preview from Goodfellas, where it has a lot of the dialogue, which has become almost American classic dialogue from Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. This is the trailer.
Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. think?
You look like a gangster.
I know
By the time I grew up, there was $30 billion a year in cargo moving through Idlewild Airport. Believe me, we tried to steal every bit of it.
What do you do?
I'm in construction.
He's not Jewish.
Mazel tov.
For most of the guys, killings got to be accepted.
Hey, Henry, here's an arm. Very funny, guys. Here's a leg.
Here's a wing. What do you like, the leg or the wing?
For us, to live any other way was nuts. And we were treated like movie stars with muscle. We had it all just for the asking.
It's gonna be a good summer.
It was a glorious time.
It's the trailer from Martin Scorsese's classic American film Goodfellas. Maybe for those of you who have not seen it, not familiar with Scorsese, I don't know who would not be, but getting over the initial shock of the violence of the film. I mean, it's still there, but I think, like you mentioned, Bob, with repeated viewings, you see more and more, and maybe you're not so... Well, you know, Joe Pesci comes on screen, and, you know, you kind of tense up anyway, but that's what he's supposed to do. And... But what a classic film, and we're glad it's on this top 100 list, and it will stay there. And again, furthering the gangster movie, which we early on in the 30s with the early Cagney stuff and Edward G. Robinson through the film noirs, and now again Scorsese sort of reinventing it once again. Of course, we could factor in even The Godfather, which is included on the list. And as you said, The Sopranos I don't think we'd have The Sopranos without Goodfellas. It's just taking it up to the next notch and a tribute to great American filmmaking, which is what we're talking about tonight.
Absolutely, Jimmy. A uniquely American story told through a uniquely American medium. And let's not forget that Paul Sorvino is amazing in this film. You also get an early look at Samuel L. Jackson as Stax, and Tony Sirico of Goodfellas fame is in this as well, as is Ileana Douglas. I mean, this film is it's chock full of great character actors everywhere you look. It's a marvel. Just a marvel.
And the movie making process by Scorsese is just amazing, how he just moves the story along. Well, you know what? We could mention some other titles on this 2007 AFI Top 100 American Movies, and ones that you would imagine are on here: To Kill a Mockingbird, Grapes of Wrath. Thankfully, Spartacus is on here, French Connection, things that we've talked about many times on this program. Take a look at it. In our closing minutes, Bob and I would like to mention a handful of films that are not on the list. And as we mentioned, let's just let this list stand, and then maybe next year another completely new set of 100 titles. But boy, you know, I love this pick of yours, Bob, The Return of the Secaucus 7. It's the first film from John Sayles. And in the American spirit of just getting a film made by whatever means necessary, I think this film is, it holds up. I was just watching it today, and with, The Big Chill, I really think was kind of a ripoff, not kind of, a definite ripoff of this film. I'm really sorry that Lawrence Kasdan did not give some sort of acknowledgement to Return of the Secaucus 7, in that just a bunch of former students getting together for a reunion and sort of talking, and just to make that happen. Great dialogue, great characters. I think John Sayles has a winner here in the American spirit, that he filmed this in 16 millimeter and, through perseverance, got it in theaters around the country, smaller theaters, and a no-budget film, which we're talking about now, many years after it was made.
Well, I think John Sayles is a filmmaker that will always resonate big. He makes small movies, but they seem to really have an impact. And this is the movie, I think this came out in 1979 or 80. We don't even know exactly when it came out. But as you said, Jimmy, I mean, he got his 16 millimeter camera, got a few people together. David Strathairn, I think, is the only recognizable person in the movie. Incidentally, he's in practically every John Sayles movie ever made. And I like to think of it as like The Graduate plus 12 years.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, the graduate generation getting together, maybe now they're in their early 30s and they're kind of reminiscing on their days as radicals and what they went through, and now they're about to approach another phase of adulthood, which is, you know, settling down. And this film, it has so much subtlety to it. I mean, it reminds me of so many summers long ago on the East Coast. It's almost got the feel of a summer film too, oddly enough.
It does.
In a strange way, you could almost see it playing on a twin bill with the first Friday the 13th movie. I don't know why, but the topography of the areas where they were shot are very similar. And it's just fun to watch. It's poignant, and more than anything, it's great, uniquely American filmmaking. John Sayles, I can't say it. We should do a show on him sometime, Jimmy.
Yes.
He deserves it.
Here's a scene from Return of the Secaucus 7, a film with no budget, but a first for John Sayles, and we want on next year's Top 100 list.
Hey, you know, we got almost all the original Secaucus 7 here.
That's right.
What's that?
An in-joke. You had to be there.
It was one of the last big Washington marches, and we all ended up going down from Boston in this station wagon.
Which Jeff had borrowed from a friend of his.
An acquaintance. Yeah, some dude he thought he knew real well. We didn't all know each other that well yet. It was me and Katie and Jeff and Mara and JT and Irene and Francis. Francis was the other one. We get on the Jersey Turnpike, and we're low on gas, so we get off in Secaucus.
Right where you pick up the Lincoln Tunnel?
In 2 seconds, we're busted. Every cop on the eastern seaboard was out that weekend trying to pick off pinkos on their way to Washington.
The guy looks in the back of our trunk.
No warrant or anything.
And there's a rifle and an ounce of dope.
Yeah, right. The cop says rifle's okay, right? But, ooh, that marijuana.
At first, we thought the guy who loaned us the car was an FBI plan who set us up.
It turned out he was just stupid.
So, we spend the night in the cooler.
Adjoining cells for men and women, segregated from the rest of the prisoners.
Right, so we don't poison their minds, right?
And we get hysterical, calling ourselves the Secaucus 7 and doing numbers from Jimmy Cagney and George Raft and what was that movie?
Salt of the earth. Right?
We want the formula. We want the formula.
Did you get sentenced? No, the turd that busted us must not have watched Dragnet or something. He made such a mess of the case, the judge had to throw it out of court. Kept the ounce, however.
We want the formula. We want the formula.
It's a scene from Return of the Secaucus 7, the first film effort from John Sayles, great American filmmaker, and a very low-budget but wonderful film that we would love to see on a Top 100 list. And before we go tonight, here's a few omissions of this AFI Top 100 list. You ready to be hit with some disbelief? The Man Who Would Be King, one that film I've squawked about on this show many, many times. That's not included on the list. Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum, and then one of the great film noirs, Out of the Past, which is not included on this list. So we're throwing these out there for next year. I don't even think Tender Mercies is included on this list, even though here we have an Australian director with one of the great American films. So, folks, there's at least 4 or 5 films that we can look forward to, hopefully will be put on a top 100 list of movies. Why limit it to 100?
Exactly.
Thanks for listening tonight, folks. Happy 4th of July, and 'tis the season to watch a great American movie. Check out this top 100 list of movies. Forget the numbers. You've got a great bunch to choose from, and what a fun discussion, Bob.
Absolutely, Jimmy. I'm just thinking number 101 on the list. My friend Todd Young turned me on to a movie David Mamet did called Lake Boat. That would be on there, too. We can't play any clips because they cuss too much. This has been a real gas.
Thanks for listening to Take Two. Our thanks to Hank, our projectionist. We'll be back again with more of Take Two next week.